So I'm sorry it's so warm in here. Maybe this will all convince you that we do, in fact, need to sell the James R. Thompson Center. We're all standing here today because this is a watershed moment for Illinois. And it took so many people to get us here, Democrats and Republicans, elected officials and engaged citizens. There are far too many people to thank. There's simply no way to enumerate the many contributions of all of those who stand behind me, but they were all critical to achieving these successes. Today, I'd like to single out just a few of those who led the efforts on the specific bills that I'll be signing here. Leader Greg Harris and Senator Heather Stearns, your steadfast leadership and your responsible approach to balancing the budget made you critical shepherds of the effort to cross the finish line and get it right. Senator Hutchinson and Representative Zaleski. Yep. There could not have been better advocates to have ushered through the fair tax rates bill. And William McNary, your dedication over the many years that it took to get here is truly unrivaled. When I took office 5 months ago, I laid out an ambitious agenda for the people of Illinois. It was an agenda that sought to put state government back on the side of working families by raising wages and creating jobs, by investing in the critical human services that make us strong, and by restoring fiscal stability after years of crisis. Today, I'm proud to say that we made real progress with one of the most consequential and transformative legislative sessions in our state's history. Guided by a vision of an Illinois whose best days are ahead, I worked with the General Assembly, and we came together to think big and get big things done. We gave 1.4 million Illinoisans a raise. We expanded apprenticeships for our young people. We made college more affordable. We protected women's reproductive health.
Yes.
We legalized adult use cannabis and sports betting. We expanded broadband internet service. I'm going to cut you short. We invested in innovation and job creation, and we launched the largest plan in Illinois history to rebuild our roads and our bridges, our universities, and our communities. We did all of that and much more. And I'm grateful to the leaders and members of the General Assembly, especially those standing behind me today, who came together to make this session a truly historic one. But perhaps the greatest unmitigated success is that we achieved something that has eluded state government for decades. We passed a real balanced budget.
Yeah.
Just a few years ago, simply passing a budget was considered nearly impossible. And for years before that, the budget included gimmicks and tricks and was balanced in name only. Those days are over. That this budget is balanced and bipartisan demonstrates just how far we've come. A new era of fiscal responsibility has arrived in Illinois. This budget balances expenditures with revenues, while making consequential investments for working families, for our communities, and for our future. We're making historic investments in education, expanding early childhood education, and bringing our evidence-based funding model to record levels. We're making college more affordable by expanding merit-based scholarships and college tuition grants to 15,000 additional students. And after years of cuts and crisis, our public universities and our community colleges are being rejuvenated. After being hollowed out for the last few years, the basic functions of government, to stand up for the most vulnerable and serve the needs of children, seniors, and families, are being restored. DCFS alone will be able to hire more than 300 new frontline workers. Yep, and we're prioritizing public safety with a focus on violence interruption and youth summer jobs programs, 2 new state police cadet classes, a new conservation police class, and new resources to reduce forensics and rape kit backlogs and manage the gun dealer licensing program. This budget makes important strides toward restoring services that Illinoisans need most and toward stabilizing state government finances. We were prudent and cautious about the investments that we made, with an emphasis on economic growth and jobs, while making sure that Illinois is living within its means, demonstrating that a progressive, forward-thinking vision is in perfect harmony with fiscal responsibility. And with a $150 million surplus, we will be able to dedicate those revenues to the monumental task of tackling our enormous bill backlog. Our effort to restore firm fiscal footing for Illinois continues in November of 2020, when voters will have the power to say yes to a fair tax system that will improve the trajectory of our state's finances forever. They will have an opportunity to vote to make sure that 97% of Illinoisans pay the same or less in income taxes, and they will have a vote on eliminating the budget deficit, paying down our bills, and reducing our pension liability. When Illinoisans vote on this constitutional amendment, they will know exactly what they are voting for, thanks to the rates legislation passed by the General Assembly. This legislation, which I'm about to sign, asks the wealthiest 3% to pay a little bit more, people like me, while the middle class and working class will pay the same or less. And if you want to see for yourself, just go to www.illinois.gov/fair tax calculator. The fair tax is necessary to ensure that we move toward permanently balancing our budgets. Opponents won't tell you that they would make us choose between much worse alternatives. They would substantially cut the very things that make us strong: education, public safety, childcare, and services for veterans and our seniors. Or they would materially raise our flat income tax rate, forcing the middle class, those striving to get there, and everyone else to pay more, 20% more. Or we can reject their alternatives and instead choose the fair tax. In signing this budget and the fair tax legislation today, I choose fiscal responsibility and fairness. Thank you, and I'd like to turn it over now to Leader Greg Harris. And by the way, it is Leader Greg Harris's birthday today.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Greg. Happy birthday to you. What a great present.
Okay, this is the best birthday yet. But besides celebrating your birthday, we're here to celebrate a huge achievement for the people of the state of Illinois. In just 5 short months, it's amazing what we've been able to do in this state under the leadership of Governor JB Pritzker. Things that have eluded this state for many years past. And everything we got done today is about 3 things. It's about people, it's about jobs, and it's about fiscal stability. We passed a bipartisan balanced budget. The Republicans and the Democrats working together under the governor's leadership to get this done for the people of the state of Illinois. We've put money in the budget to lead us back to a better credit rating with $1.3 billion committed to paying down the backlog of old bills. We've all seen the terrible stories coming out of DCFS, and it was a #1 priority of all of us to give the resources to protect the children of Illinois. $130 million goes into DCFS this year for new programs, new training, and hundreds of new employees. We've made investments for more affordable housing and ending homelessness, not just in the operating portion of the budget, but also major investments in the capital portion. Today, a news story called this year for colleges and universities, the best budget for higher education in over a generation. The best budget in over a generation for higher ed. When we talk about violence prevention, the wellness of our families, we know how important it is to have access to behavioral health. This budget increases what the state's spending on behavioral health and substance abuse treatment by $80 million statewide. We give another $375 million to public schools to help them decrease their reliance on local property taxes and bring down the property tax rate. In this budget, because of the compromises and negotiations with the Republicans, there is an immediate tax decrease. There is an immediate tax decrease for 300,000 small businesses statewide. We've made major investments in environment, parks, open space, clean air and water, mass transit, pedestrian, and bicycle infrastructure. We've put in place programs to attract high-tech jobs and employers to the state of Illinois. And from the capital bill alone, it is projected that there will be 100,000 direct new jobs created in our state. 100,000 direct new jobs. So on top of that, we've added new incentives to bring more businesses to the state of Illinois, and we specially targeted them to bring businesses to areas that are underserved, that have high areas of poverty, to make sure that the benefits and the wealth is evenly distributed across our state and that everyone benefits. So ladies and gentlemen, that's just a couple reasons. Well, I'm proud to support this budget. I want to thank the governor, Lieutenant Governor Stratton, and everyone who worked on this, but most especially my counterpart in the Senate, Senator Heather Sains.
Wow, what a difference a year and a governor makes. You know, they say that a good leader takes more of the blame than deserved and less of the credit than deserved. And I got to tell you, our leader and this new governor doesn't take the credit that he deserves and the way we got here. Thank you, seriously. The tone that was set from the beginning of this administration was one where we want to work in a bipartisan fashion and we want to actually solve problems for the people of the state of Illinois. And boy, we have done that in droves this session. I also want to do a quick shout out to the Deputy Governor Dan Hines and Alexis Sturm, who were worked with Greg and I every step of the way on crafting this budget. You know, without their work at the helm, I don't think we would have gotten here. You know, there's a lot been said about what this budget actually does. I don't need to repeat all that. I just want to say that fiscal stability in the state of Illinois is of the utmost importance. We hear concerns about what's happening here, people leaving, we've been decimating our nonprofit organizations. They've been closing up. Nursing homes have been doing that. This budget now finally reverses that and shows that Illinois is not just surviving, we're thriving in this day and age. We've been able to put more money into nursing homes, so instead of closing their doors, they'll be able to stay stable. Folks that take care of elderly in homes are going to finally get a rate increase that's much needed. The local community mental health system that has been closing up shop around the state because of underinvestment and substance abuse treatment programs, and we know we have large opioid problems, those are getting rate increases and investment for the first time in a very long time. Overall, this is really putting our money where our mouth is and saying that we need to actually make sure we're taking care of the folks in Illinois. That's what's going to keep folks here, and doing so in a way that is fiscally responsible. For the 7th year in a row, we're making our full pension payments. I know there have been some concerns about that. I think everybody here is delighted we were able to do that in a way that works for the state of Illinois and keeps us on a very firm fiscal footing. So I just really, from the bottom of my heart, want to thank Governor Pritzker for the way we've been turning around the state and really taking it in a new, very different and very bright direction. Thank you very much. And I'm glad we're doing this on Greg Harris's birthday. You know, he and I have worked together for a long time, and being able to go through and work in the trenches with somebody like Greg is a real honor. It's worked very well, and I really thank him tremendously. I get to turn it over to Toy Hutchinson, who is our other person who really works heavily on the budget with us from the revenue side. She can talk a little bit about what we've accomplished there, but there's all no one-time revenues, no gimmicks. This is all sustaining things that really have the support that we need to shore up our finances and make all these great investments. Thank you, Toy.
Woo. This is incredible, and you can see how many people are here and how warm it is in here. I'm loving all the lights and the like. This is lights, camera, action here, which is why I'm just going to do this for a second, because once you hit a certain age, ladies. Okay, so we know that for a long time people have been able to have conversations about taxes without talking about what taxes pay for. And that means we've had a structural deficit in this state for a very, very long time. I knew 10 years ago when I first came in that one of the first things I learned about when I became chair of the Senate Revenue Committee was that we had an old, antiquated, out-of-date tax code that didn't work for an economy that we actually had. It is not 1969. I don't know who in here is still driving a 1969 car or wondering what, I just bought a new house and there's a refrigerator in there. It's a 1973 refrigerator. I think I need a new one now. This is not, it's 2019. And what we found is that you cannot put proper investments into the things that we care about without investment on the front end and expect anything different on the back end. And we've been doing that for decades, every single year. And so what the rates package did was, one, we answered a call from the community to be transparent. That we weren't going to ask you to vote on something in a vacuum that was nebulous, that you didn't understand what it was. We came to this with the understanding that the budget is a moral document. Don't tell us what you believe in. Show us what you believe in. When the governor set out and said, this is the framework that we're going to do, we want 97% of the people not to pay anymore. We want to put the burden on people who could better afford it. We want to then put those resources in the areas that our constituents demand. This is us doing exactly what our constituencies asked us to do. I know in my heart that on the day I decided to say out loud who I hoped our next governor would be, one of the things I said was, our problems are way too big to think small. And he was going around telling everybody, we're going to think big, we're going to do big things. And I said, our problems are way too big to think small. And after serving in the Senate for 10 years, I can tell you that the end of this session was one of the most intense and busy and hectic and very, very difficult things to get through, because we did it together and we did it in a way that we haven't seen in years. And I know that I am so proud to stand in front and put my name on a rates bill so we could tell the truth to the people who sent us here. We've been operating for too long, behaving as though doing the exact same thing since 1969 was going to change something in 2019. Change is coming. Investment is coming. This state is rebuilding. And I am so proud to serve under a governor who is able to say right now, after everything that happened this session, that Illinois is open for business. We are ready to meet the challenges that the future holds, and we're ready to solve 21st century problems with 21st century solutions. We're not looking backwards. Don't look in the rearview mirror. We're not going that direction. This is about moving forward, and it's time. It's so far past time. So I'm going to turn it over now to my partner in this, which was Representative Zaleski. Where is he? Where is he? Come in. Because nothing happens in both places.
I'm going to be quick so we don't all pass out before the governor can sign the bill. Along with taking significant steps to improve our future this year, a bipartisan balanced budget, a comprehensive capital bill that will fix our infrastructure, and policies that will drive economic growth, we are in the right position to ensure we never again face these fundamental problems. Both the rates bill and SJR CA1, which wouldn't have happened without Leader Hutchinson, Leader Lightford, Leader Menard, Senator Harmon, Representative Martwick, Representative Turner, and last but not least, the governor of the state of Illinois. We will never again have, we will move to a tax system where those who can afford to pay more to help support our programs and services and ensure 97% of the people working in the middle class pay less or get a tax freeze. I applaud the governor for his unwavering leadership and my colleagues in the legislature for taking this bold step. And now it's time for Illinois to step up and approve the fair tax solution. I'd like to next introduce a gentleman that's worked tirelessly in the building for 10 years to get this done, William McNary.
Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon. That's pretty good. My name is William McNary, MC capital N-A-R-Y, and I'm the director of Citizen Action Illinois. But I'm also a proud member of the Responsible Budget Coalition, a large and diverse coalition of over 300 organizations that came together over 10 years ago to fight for a fair, responsible budget with adequate revenues to fund education and health care and human services and public safety and other shared priorities. We represent children and families and veterans and seniors and persons with disabilities and human service providers and labor unions and their members and faith-based organizations and civic organizations, community-based organizations, fiscal policy experts, and education groups, early learning, K through 12, and higher education. We united behind the belief that a budget is more than just numbers on a page or entries on an account ledger. A budget is a moral document that represents our common values. And we organized around the basic principle that a responsible budget is one with adequate revenues fairly raised from those who can most afford it, not an unbalanced house of cards that lurches from crisis to the next with harmful cuts to Illinois families and communities. And for the past 10 years, we've advocated for a fair tax to give working people a break while asking wealthy people just to pay their fair share. We believe that with a responsible budget, we all do better when we all do better. And today, we are here to celebrate both getting a responsible budget signed into law, but also for the fact that we are closer now than we have ever been to the fair tax reform that is so critical to our state's future and putting Illinois on solid fiscal footing. But there is more work to do. Over the next 17 months, we'll have a great debate for the hearts and minds of our fellow Illinoisans. You see, the wealthy and the powerful and the connected, they like things the way they are. And they're not going to go away without a fight. They're going to make the case for the status quo. But as a noted philosopher, Moms Mabley once said, if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. And that is deficits and downgrades and backlogs and cuts. But our side is going to make a different case, a case for fair tax reform, for a public policy that takes us on the road to shared prosperity by giving a break to the middle class and for those struggling to get into the middle class, and by asking the wealthy who can afford it to pay a little bit more to invest those revenues in good schools and strong communities and responsibly pay what we owe. And we're going to let the voters decide which vision they prefer. Lastly, this is not only historic, but it has been decades in the making. Citizen Action's predecessor policy council adopted the fair tax policy proposal in 1981. And there's an old proverb that says the true meaning of life is to plant trees under whose shade you do not expect to sit. So to all the activists and the advocates and the analysts and the academicians who have labored so diligently over the past years, I want to thank you for the seed that you have planted. To all the legislators who have labored with us in the past, I want to thank you for the trees, the seeds that you planted, for the trees, the fair tax reform trees that are growing today will not only provide shades for ourselves, but for our children and our children's children and our children's children's children. So tomorrow the fight for a fair tax continues, but today we celebrate. So thank you to Governor Pritzker and to Lieutenant Governor Stratton, our two quarterbacks who helped us bring fair tax reform over the finish line, the goal line. To the deputy governors and the governor's staff for your strategy. To our legislative champions, the coaches who have been fighting like Comptroller Mendoza for this fight for years. Thank you. And particularly to two that didn't get to speak that should have probably got to speak, Leader Harmon and Representative Martwick. Thank you so much for your leadership as well. And to my colleagues and all the activists and the strategists and the advocates who have been doing the blocking and the tackling up and down the field for the past 10 years that led to this day, and some of us much longer than that, maybe longer than we care to commit. I truly believe that because of the work that we have done, the work that we are doing, and most importantly, the work that we're getting ready to do, we are much closer to achieving the ideal of the Illinois Constitution, which in its first sentence says, we dedicate us to provide for the health, safety, and welfare of the people, to eliminate poverty and inequality, to assure legal, social, and economic justice, and provide opportunity for the fullest development of the individual. So help me God, truly. We all do better. We all do better when we all do better. And now I am elephant elated and peacock proud and hippopotamus happy to bring a man who not only has big ideas, but he has a big heart, big enough to have compassion for all of the people of the state of Illinois, our governor, Governor JB Pritzker.
I'm going to go sign a few of these.
Ma'am, please step back. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, so let's see. We got bill number 1.
Let me just get it, bathe in your fanning.
Feels good.
You were able to get an angle?
Investment on pencils. I can't tell the difference between this one and the one Rauner used. No, you can't. Do you remember that? Jesse. Thank you.
Lieutenant Governor says I need more letters in my name.
Done.
Can't help with all the bills.
So just for the record, that was, which one did you just sign?
This first one was our, this is the budget bill. Where's Matt? I don't want to drop it.
It's only 1,100.
Yeah, there you go. 10 revenue.
That's the 15. That was your work and your work. This is your work.
Yeah.
That was 1,500. This is for. Which bill is this? This bill. McNary.
This is the bid bill and the revenue bill.
Did you get one, Dave? Dave Woods.
I know.
Peller?
I'm getting a picture for a request. Here?
Gabby.
Abby.
Abby?
Can we send one to Rauner? Greg? Can we send one to Rauner? Because he's probably more responsible for this than anybody.
I can send him one of his back. How many letters are there in JB is what I'm wondering.
I think he's using a period.
The world's biggest period.
How many more do we need to get there?
The whole crew, this whole side.
Did not remember the last name. Did you remember the first name?
Not with the flag. Yeah, so anyway. Oh, no, it's just behind this.
Which one?
No, behind this. You got one?
I got one, thank you.
Did Dan get one? Rabbit? Rabbit? Did you get one? Rabbit?
Dan.
Come. Okay. Happy birthday to you.
Not after I'm done.
Yeah, you get it.
This is the fair tax rate bill.
Over here, there's one. Senator, there's one over here.
Take a few questions from the podium.
Yep, I will. Back to the podium.
Yeah. Fan, that's right.
Yes, sir. Yep. Well, I said for 2 years on the campaign trail that if you really want to lower property taxes, one of the things you need to do is make sure you fund schools properly. People talk about a property tax freeze or lowering property taxes, but then they don't tell you how they're going to pay for schools. I've told you how I'll pay for schools, and we're increasing funding in the evidence-based funding model, as you saw, not just by the required $350 million, but an additional $25 million. But the fair tax will also allow us to increase funding into education, which then in turn allows us to turn back to the local schools and ask them to see that the state is paying more into schools and that they in turn can lower or freeze property taxes. But let me say another thing, that property taxes are made up of a number of lines. One of them is infrastructure. And you saw that we passed a major infrastructure plan that includes big funding for local municipalities to help them pay for their infrastructure. So when you add those two things together, our goal of funding schools properly at the state level, where, as you know, we're second to last today in Illinois in state funding for education. If we can raise that up, we can lower the burden on local property taxes, and as we fund infrastructure for local governments, it gives them the opportunity to lower property taxes. But this task force has other good ideas, and we're going to be listening to those, working with that task force, and by the end of the year, they will issue ideas and recommendations, and then we'll go forward in the next session, hopefully with both administrative changes that we might be able to make at state government as well as legislative.
Governor, there's a lot of talk about bipartisan. Leaders issued a statement in the last few minutes that was emailed out that says Democrats will continue to come back year after year and pickpocket more money from Illinois families and businesses, and that Illinois families should not trust what's being promised, which are the quotes as the rates today?
Well, first thing I'd say is I was pleased to have bipartisan support for this budget, bipartisan support for the infrastructure projects that we're going to be doing all over the state, and for the bills and the revenue that goes with it. And I was pleased to work with Leader Durkin on some of the tax credits that he wanted for some businesses in the state. And that, of course, takes away from dollars that you can put into other programs for people across the state, but I thought they were worthy for job creation. And, you know, that's a form of spending also when you give tax credits. So, look, we're going to work together going forward. I realize that this is we're once again going to be in a political season where people are, you know, telling untruths about the fair tax. But the fact is that we're going to nevertheless work across the aisle to get things done in this state together. And I was pleased that we had a bipartisan, truly bipartisan, with bicameral support, balanced budget, a real balanced budget that included the votes of many Republicans.
Were any Republicans invited to come today?
As you know, we had a press conference in Springfield. It was much easier for many of them to join us there. Anybody's invited, but the fact is that I was pleased that the leaders of the efforts around the fair tax and my budget proposals are here with me today.
Governor, there's a lot of spending in this budget, a lot of big projects. This is your first session. Do you think there should be more transparency about the way this all goes down? Like it's June 5th and we're just kind of getting numbers trickling in about a lot of projects. Do you think that should be done differently?
Well, as you know, we had bipartisan working groups for months and months working on various aspects of this bill. There's nothing that's a surprise to people. The truth is that everything was talked about across the aisle, and we're pleased with the results of this budget.
Governor, do you think, you said the budget is fully funded in terms of the pension payment, the $8.4 million?
9.1. Mm-hmm.
Is it 9.1
Yes, it is.
billion dollars?
Yep.
But as you know, generally acceptable actuarial accounting principles say you would be paying something like $13 billion, because they would say your payment, good as it might be, like Rauner before, like Quinn before, doesn't even cover the interest. You would need another $4 billion to sort of cover the principal and start reducing that $200 billion unfunded pensions. What do you say to those actuaries?
Well, what I would say, first of all, is that we're paying the full payment that is required under the ramp that was put in place in 1995. The statutory required payment. And as you know, that ramp takes us to 2045, where we will be paying roughly $19 billion in that year if we don't do something between now and then to bend that cost curve. It's important to me that we address pensions. And I said, you know, at my first press conference after the legislative session, that there are two things that we, you know, haven't addressed in significant fashion that I would like to go after. One of them is property taxes. One of them is pensions. Now, I'm not talking about lowering, you know, taking away people's pensions. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about managing our pension system better, making sure that we can actually pay people the pensions that are owed to them. And as you know, there are a number of things that we can do, and I put forward a task force that's looking now and delivering to me recommendations about assets that we can transfer into the pension system so that we can better able to manage our net pension liability, which we all want to reduce. And there are other ideas that we put forward. So I think these are all things that we're going to be addressing together over the next several years.
Governor, there's going to be a PR campaign to fight this between now and November 2020. What kind of effort are you going to put in to convincing voters, and how confident are you that they will support this with the 60% need?
I feel very confident that the public understands the importance of instituting a fair tax in the state of Illinois. That the fact that people who are wealthier can afford to pay it, people like me should step up to the plate, and that we ought to give some tax relief or at least maintain for middle class and working class people across this state. I said this for 2 years on the campaign trail, how important it is that we alleviate the burden on people across the state, middle class people who are have been put upon. Their wages, roughly speaking, have been stagnant. The cost of health care for them has gone up. The cost of sending their kids to college has gone up. We need to change the trajectory for the middle class and those striving to get there, and we're doing it. We began to do it this year. There's much more work ahead.
What do you say to the folks who are going to see maybe a break on their income tax, but that's all going to be eaten up by higher gas taxes and other taxes and fees?
Well, I would say that the infrastructure bill allows us to invest in things that will save people money in the long run, for example, and create jobs. Let me be clear. We're going to create hundreds of thousands of jobs as a result of this infrastructure bill. But remember, when you drive to work and you hit all those potholes and then you get a flat tire, that costs you money. When you drive to work and you hit the potholes and now you need to go have your steering realigned and you need to have your car fixed because of it, that costs you money. When the rail system, when our mass transit system isn't operating properly and you can't get to work, that costs you money. So we're investing in the things that really matter in this state. It's been almost 20 years. I realize people look back and say there was a capital bill 10 years ago, but it got truncated halfway through, as you remember, by the prior governor. The fact is that many of these things haven't been addressed for 20 years, and we run an infrastructure deficit every single year in this state. So, there's a recommendation that we invest in infrastructure of a couple of $2 billion more than we actually are able to allocate in our budget. And so this helps us catch up on that, on the life safety aspects of infrastructure that are so important, and then helps us invest in forward thinking in economic growth and job creation, attracting businesses to our state. They want solid, good infrastructure in our state. We have many businesses that rely upon it. We're doing that now with Rebuild Illinois. Thank you all very much.
Congratulations.